December 1941, Singapore sleeps. The jewel of Britain's empire, untouched, unaware, and dangerously unprepared. British soldiers drink at Raffles Hotel. They believe Singapore is impregnable. They are dangerously wrong. The Malayan jungle stretches endlessly. Ancient, silent, and about to become a highway for invasion. Rubber plantations cover Malaya like a green carpet. Nobody imagines an army could move through them at speed. In Saigon, Japan loads bicycles onto ships. A simple weapon that will humiliate the British Empire. Hundreds of bicycles. Hundreds of soldiers. A revolution in jungle warfare quietly boarding transport ships. The Japanese fleet moves without lights through the South China Sea. Darkness carrying 70 days of catastrophe. December 8, 1941. Japanese soldiers wade ashore at Kota Bharu. The invasion of Malaya has begun. British Indian defenders scramble to their positions. The surprise is complete. The shock is total. 600 miles of jungle separate Japan's landing point from Singapore. They will cover it in weeks. Japanese bicycle troops pedal south through jungle roads. Faster than any British commander thought possible. British officers study maps and rubber plantations. The Japanese are already moving faster than their pencils. Penang, beautiful, colonial, wealthy, and completely exposed to an enemy nobody expected from the north. Civilians flee south, carrying everything they own. The certainty of British power dissolving with every step. Australians dig trenches in jungle heat. They are building defenses against an enemy already behind them. Japanese soldiers emerge from jungle the British called impassable. No defense can stop what it cannot see. Jitra falls. The British defensive line, weeks in preparation, abandoned in days. The retreat accelerates. Young Australians rest against rubber trees. Weeks from captivity. Miles from home, completely unaware, Kuala Lumpur glows at dusk. Smoke on the northern horizon tells its story. The capital is next to fall. British soldiers burn their own supplies rather than leave them. Every destroyed depot marks a retreat. January 1942. Japanese soldiers march into Kuala Lumpur. The Malayan capital falls without a final battle. From the air, Singapore is still far south. On the ground, Japan is closing that distance every single hour. Exhausted men retreat through jungle paths. An army that came to defend Malaya is now simply trying to survive it. The causeway, 1 mile of concrete. The last physical connection between Malaya and Singapore Island. January 31st. The last Allied troops cross into Singapore. The Malayan campaign is over. Britain has lost. Engineers place explosives on the causeway. The empire is about to blow up its own bridge in desperate hope. The causeway explodes. Singapore is now an island, cut off, crowded, and running out of time. Singapore City is overwhelmed. 1 million civilians, 85,000 soldiers, and nowhere left to run. From the air, Singapore looks like a trapped animal, surrounded by water and closing Japanese forces. General Yamashita studies his maps in Johor. He has conquered Malaya in 70 days. Singapore is next. Japanese artillery positions on the Johor shore. Singapore Island sits across the water like an undefended target. February 8th, Japanese guns open fire on Singapore. The bombardment that will end British Asia begins. Singapore's northern shore erupts in fire and smoke. The island is being systematically destroyed from across the water. That same night, Japanese assault troops climb silently into boats. The crossing has begun. Hundreds of boats cross the dark strait. Singapore's fires guide them like a burning lighthouse toward their target. Japanese soldiers wade through Singapore's mangroves. For the first time, enemy boots touch the island's soil. Australian 8th Division fights desperately on the western sector. Brave men holding ground that cannot be held. In the jungle, Australians fight at arm's length. This is not the war they trained for. Nothing is. Tengah Airfield burns. Singapore's last aircraft are destroyed on the ground. The sky now belongs to Japan. 1 million civilians shelter in cellars and shophouses. They trusted the empire to protect them. It cannot. Singapore harbor becomes chaos, ships packed with refugees. Japanese aircraft hunting every vessel that moves. Japanese Zero fighters dive on the harbor. The sea route out of Singapore becomes as dangerous as staying. The Empress of Asia burns in the harbor approach. Troops meant to reinforce Singapore never reach the shore. Indian Army soldiers defend the Bukit Timah Road. They are defending Singapore's food, fuel, and final hope. Bukit Timah falls. Japan now holds Singapore's water reservoirs and supply depots. The end is hours away. General Percival stares at his maps. The defensive perimeter shrinks with every report that reaches his bunker. Alexandra Hospital flies the Red Cross. The battle rages around it. The rules of war are being forgotten. Chinatown burns. Singapore's Chinese population feared this day most. Japan has reached their doors. The water supply is failing. In tropical heat without water, an army and a city cannot survive a single day more. Singapore burns through the night. The city that was called Fortress is becoming a furnace. In Fort Canning Bunker, British officers face the impossible. Surrender means humiliation. Resistance means massacre. Japanese Imperial guards advance through Singapore's streets. They are walking through the Empire's graveyard. February 15, 1942, General Percival walks toward Japanese lines carrying a white flag, the longest walk in British history. The Ford Motor Factory. An ordinary building about to witness an extraordinary and devastating humiliation. Percival stands before Yamashita. Victor and defeated face each other across a table and across history. A hand signs a document. 85,000 soldiers become prisoners with a single stroke of a pen. The Japanese rising sun flag rises over Singapore harbor. The British Empire in Asia is finished. 85,000 men begin the march to Changi. The largest surrender in British military history moves on foot. Young Australians sit in Changi's dust. Yesterday soldiers, today prisoners. Tomorrow, 3.5 years of suffering. From the air, Singapore flies Japanese flags where Union Jacks flew that same morning. Empire ends quickly. Japanese soldiers remove British royal symbols from government buildings. Stone by stone, the empire is erased. Japan marched through Singapore's streets in victory. The colonial world Britain built here is gone forever. British soldiers are forced to clean the streets they once patrolled. Humiliation is part of Japan's strategy. Singapore harbor serves a new empire now. Japanese warships anchor where the Royal Navy once ruled. In Changi, prisoners build a life from almost nothing. Survival becomes the only mission that matters now. Singapore is renamed Sinan II Light of the South, a colonial city rebranded for a different empire. Two great battleships, Prince of Wales and Repulse, sailed to defend Singapore. They deserved better orders. Japanese torpedo bombers find the ships without air cover. Britain's naval strategy for Asia dies in the South China Sea. Prince of Wales sinks, 840 men lost. Britain's belief in Singapore's invincibility sinks with them. Oil-blackened survivors are pulled from the sea. The Royal Navy's worst day in Asian waters is complete. In London, Churchill receives the news. He calls it the worst disaster and largest capitulation in British history. Australia's flag flies at half-mast in Canberra. 15,000 Australians are now Japan's prisoners. Across India, people read the headlines. If Britain cannot hold Singapore, can it hold India itself? Churchill writes his statement. The man who promised to never surrender must explain why 85,000 men just did. Singapore's fall opens the entire Pacific and Indian Ocean to Japanese expansion. One defeat changes the world map. Japanese fleets depart Singapore for the Dutch East Indies. The fortress has become the enemy's greatest naval base. In Thailand's jungles, Singapore's prisoners begin building a railway. The death railway starts with their broken hands. The faces of the death railway. Starvation, disease, and tropical heat written on men who were soldiers months ago. Singapore's Chinese civilians faced Japanese vengeance in the Suk Ching massacres. Between 20 and 50,000 die. Hell ships leave Singapore harbor packed with prisoners. Many will be sunk by Allied submarines that don't know they carry their own men. 1 year of occupation. Singapore has been renamed, reordered, and redirected to serve a different empire entirely. In Changi, a hidden radio brings news of distant battles. Hope is kept alive by whispered words in tropical darkness. 1945, Allied aircraft appear over Singapore again. The Japanese fighters that once ruled this sky no longer rise to meet them. September 12, 1945. British officers returned to the same Singapore buildings they surrendered 3 years before. Skeletal men emerge from captivity, blinking in sunlight. 3.5 years of suffering end in a single September morning. The Union Jack rises over Singapore again. But the world that flag once commanded will never return. Percival, freed from captivity, is flown to Tokyo Bay to witness Japan's final surrender. He earned that moment. On USS Missouri, Japan surrenders. Percival watches. The man who signed Singapore away watches Japan sign everything away. Kranji Cemetery, row upon row of white headstones. British, Australian, Indian, equal in death under Singapore's sky. Changi Chapel stands simple and wooden, built by prisoners from almost nothing, like hope itself in captivity. Same peninsula, same island, same strait, different names, different flags, different world made by 70 days of war. The Ford factory is now a museum. The room where Britain surrendered now teaches what surrender truly costs. Singapore at dawn in our time, same harbor, same tropical light. The ghosts of 1942 invisible beneath modern glass towers. The Johor Strait is peaceful today. Nobody crossing it now can feel the weight of what crossed here in 1942. Old veterans gather with their medals. The last men who remember Singapore remember it every day without trying. Singapore's cenotaph stands where colonial power once seemed permanent. Permanence, 1942 taught the world, is an illusion. Pull back far enough, and Singapore is just a small island in a vast blue sea. How much history fits in so small a place? One aged face looks across Singapore harbor. Behind those eyes, 70 days that changed the world and cost everything. The same dawn light, the same harbor, the same island. But the empire that lost it here never truly recovered. 70 days, 85,000 prisoners. 100,000 civilian deaths. Britain's greatest defeat complete. The jungle paths where Japanese bicycles rolled are overgrown now. The jungle remembers nothing. We must remember everything. Before the war, Japanese and British shared Singapore's streets in uneasy commerce. War made neighbors into enemies. Yamashita demanded yes or no. No negotiation, no delay. Percival chose his men's lives over his nation's pride. Singapore's fall opened Burma, India, and Australia to Japanese threat. One battle, one island, one world changed forever. British, Indian, Australian, Malay. Different faces, different homes, different faiths, the same defeat, the same captivity. Modern Singapore remembers at its cenotaph, an independent nation honoring a battle fought before it existed. Pull back from Singapore, island, strait, peninsula, ocean. 70 days of war on this geography rewrote the modern world. One old survivor looks toward Changi from the harbor. He carries 1942 in his eyes every moment of every remaining day. Singapore at dawn, then and now, the empire fell here. A nation rose here. History does not end, it transforms.